Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had such a great time there in Atlanta at Cummings, Georgia. The church was hungry. Folks were excited. It was fun. Hey, if you're in the Tulsa area, we'll be at World Outreach Church tonight, our home church where we travel out of. We love being in our home church. So wonderful to be able to be there with them, like family. And we're on the road all the time, so you don't get to see them, so it'll be great to see them. And this weekend, if you're anywhere, probably about an hour and a half from Tulsa, in Alma, Arkansas, we'll be at Beyond Church, Sunday morning, Sunday night. We'll have a great time there as well. So we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war. Because you know the rapture's signless. Second coming has tons of signs. And I think in the book there's 79 or 80. It was comical when people were looking at the book and they say, we were fact checking you and we found out that all that stuff is true. I said, exactly. I'm not smart enough to come up with this on my own. So all these detailed things that the Bible said you'd see just before the coming of the Lord, you can get your checklist off. And I think I say it every week, but every week I get surprised about what happened. And boy, what a thing last night. You have a conservative president in the United States. Be interesting to see how that affects the Middle East, how it affects Turkey, how it affects the UN. You got the EU doing crazy stuff this last week. So the UN and the EU doing crazy enough stuff every week that almost gets you going like, what in the world? Listen to how crazy this one is about the UN. In New York, there's an exhibit that's there. As you walk into the exhibit, this is physically in the city of New York, in the UN building, and there's verbiage to annihilate Israel and wipe Israel off the map. In the UN building in the United States of America. Absolutely insane. So Jesus wants us to know, remember he rebuked the crowd one time, the Pharisees over and over and over again. Why? What was the one time he rebuked them? He said, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of visitation. So he wanted them to know. There's something about knowing how close you are that brings change. I hear people all the time go, oh, we don't need to talk about end times. Well, it's not an escape theology, it's a hustle theology. If you have all these markers or signs that show you how close you are, you make adjustments, just like a quarterback. If the play clock's winding down, he's got to hustle, and I start screaming at the TV, and Colleen goes, honey, they can't hear you, but I scream like crazy if it looks like the quarterback's not paying attention. Well, it's sad that so many in the church aren't paying attention. It's a big deal because we're the last runners in a relay. You can drop the ball at the beginning of the game, at the end you can't. So let's look at all the things that are happening around Israel. A few things that I keep forgetting last week and the week before. Man, you had 6 different journalists from Al Jazeera come to find out they were Hamas terrorists that Al Jazeera is using. Then you find out that Al Jazeera has been collaborating with Hamas to promote what they wanted to promote, to make Israel look bad. Kind of remarkable to have that come out. And then you have with the UN, people were like, why is Israel being tough on the UN? Well, they were coming to find out so many of the people that were on the squad, they were all Hamas terrorists as well. This is how crazy it gets right now. The CBS News told their reporters not to say that Jerusalem was in Israel. That's almost beyond bizarre, but that's kind of the mentality that you're dealing with right now. So let's look at what's happened around Israel as well. Boy, you had 2 different airstrikes in Syria, right by Damascus. One was a little closer to the Lebanese border, where literally stockpiles of missiles that were there. Israel normally downplays it and doesn't talk about it. This is how big it was. They talked about it and said, we did it. 2 days in a row, and then you had Damascus last week. So Damascus keeps getting brought up because, Isaiah 17:1 says Damascus will be removed from being a city. So we're going to wake up one day and come out and watch TV, and it's not going to be there. So crazy things are happening in the Israeli, I say government. We know Benjamin Netanyahu went ahead and dismissed or fired Gallant. Everybody went crazy. There's people picketing all over Israel. Well, the reason why he had to do that was Gallant was publicly coming against his thought pattern, his views. Now, Gallant's been in the military a long time. He's a great serviceman, but you don't publicly come against your prime minister, especially in a time of war. That's ridiculous. That's nuts. So everybody's talking about what's that going to do? Well, what's happening right now, nothing has changed as far as with Iran. They're looking to see Iran any day. We thought it was going to happen yesterday. Iran says they're going to attack Israel and they're going to use bigger missiles. So things seemingly get ratcheted up. I know we talk about war and rumors of war seemingly every week, but that's what the Bible said you'd see. And when you see the players for the Ezekiel 38 war literally bringing this to pass, it has to be recognized. North Korea has troops in Russia. They're going into the Ukraine and fighting for Russia right now. And with that, there was a whole pact that came together. It wasn't just an agreement to go, hey, you guys come fight for us. They're signing agreements for missiles with bombs. North Korea, being shown how to make more nuclear weapons. I mean, you had last night in America, at the end of all of the circumstances with the election, America shot off a hypersonic nuclear missile from Vandenberg Air Force Base. I mean, kind of bizarre to have that happening at the same time. You had another report that came out this last week that the asteroid that's going to come by in 2029, it's called the God of Chaos, that it's having debris fall off of it, so it's changing its rotation and its orbit. So it's kind of interesting to see the asteroid that's supposed to come close to the world being altered to where it's changing its path. So the Bible talks about one called wormwood hitting during the tribulation. And the other one that is happening in 2029 is wormwood. I remember preaching in the Ukraine saying that, people gasped. And I thought, what's the deal about wormwood? So we're Chernobyl. All this stuff is real. It's all happening right in front of our eyes. The specific things with what's happening, you had strange weather, you had Saudi Arabia, you had so much sleet and hail that it looked like wintertime outside. You got all these floods happening, all this stuff with nature happening. But the amazing thing that keeps happening is event after event keeps showing us. You know, for the first coming, there's all these verses. There's 8 times more about the second coming. So God did this to where it'd be documented so that we'd come to the very end of the church age and go, wow, this is the time for the church to hustle. What do? Help our local church, help our local pastor. We're being engaged. I mean, there's so many things that happened this last week. Israel going into Gaza again. Gaza's still firing missiles. You had Lebanon, Hezbollah send 160 missiles on Shabbat the other day. But listen to what Israel found. They were going into houses in Lebanon with missiles coming toward them, and they unearthed so many missiles in every single house that they said they could come up with a brand new tank regiment out of all the ammo and all the stuff that they found in every home in Lebanon. Look how a whole nation would have stockpiles of weaponry to kill Israel in their homes. It's just an interesting time that everyone is surrounding Israel. America had to threaten Iran. You can't fire missiles from Iraq. They were going to let them fire missiles from Iraq into Israel. And then you had Iran firing missiles at our base in Iraq. And you'd have not one word said from our administration. I believe this next administration not only going to say some things, they're probably going to do some things. So it's just one of the most unusual times ever, the setup for the coming of the Lord. So you be engaged, you be steadfast. You're going to be raptured very, very soon. So with seeing the finish line, we should run faster. We always go back, though, and look at the Scriptures. The Scripture is very good and awesome about showing us things we can look at so that we can tell where we are. Number one, Israel regathered as a nation in 1948. Jerusalem won back in 1967. Jesus said the generation sees those two. You won't pass away, you'll be it. So how amazing that we're blessed. Then you got the Hebrew language restored. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You got the revival of the Roman Empire. You got the EU. You got the Capitol building in Strasbourg that looks identical to the Tower of Babel. It's not similar, it's identical. You have the archway for Baal worship. Russia built this in Palmyra in Syria. That's where the Tower of Babel was. The Talmud says that's the last sign you'll see before the Messiah comes. This week, you had this last week, you had the libation happening right there at the Temple Mount with a new Ark of the Covenant right there that was built. It's about 3 tons. We talked about that. It was in Shiloh. They got together this last week in Shiloh and prayed for our elections. You had Jews praying for America for our election. Amazing right there in Shiloh where all that stuff is, where the Ark of the Covenant was. So a lot of things happening. So then after that, you've got foxes on the Temple Mount. You have fish in the Dead Sea. You had the Dead Sea turn blood red during where Sodom and Gomorrah was on the Day of Atonement. That's just absolutely crazy. I think the most remarkable one to me is the predatory birds. You have 172 different species of predatory birds start showing up in the land of Israel. Right after the rapture, you have the Ezekiel 38 war. God calls on the fowl of the air to clean the land up. After the Battle of Armageddon, he calls on the fowl of the air to clean the land up again. So you have birds in position, fish in position. You have the Temple Mount Institute ready. I mean, it's remarkable. They have the menorah. They have all the stuff they need. They even got the red heifers from Texas, and they didn't have their ears clipped because of COVID. But they already started clipping their ears again. So you have a group of cows. How they got them to Israel from Texas was they listed them as service animals. I think that would be weird to be walking through the airport with a cow on a leash, but anyway, they're there. So God's got all this stuff together for Israel to do what it needs to do because the king's about to come. There's many, many, many more signs. You have men will be lovers themselves. You have selfie sticks. You got Bishop Malachi having a vision of every pope that would be on the earth all the way up into the coming of the Lord. He saw their coat of arms. He got it correct 114 out of 114. This is on the History Channel. The History Channel said that's statistically impossible. Only a God can do that. That's exactly right. And the pope that he saw, the 114th, is the last one. That's the one we have right now. Remarkable. See, he's God. So that's why we get into end time preaching. He said, look, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen before it happens, and that gives credibility and authenticity to the Bible, because he's watching over his word to perform it. So we have all these signs, all this information, all this stuff happening right now. What do we do as a church? Hustle. Everything. We don't fit church into our life. It is our life. We just go for it. I mean, there's so many more things happening with the stars, with asteroids, that I don't get into every week, that we don't have time. But there's stuff happening, kind of the hidden things happening with Turkey and with Syria and Iran, that if you got into everything that was happening about that, you just go, oh, wait a minute, this is impossible. This all could be happening. It should preach to us and yell at us and communicate to us that we're about to leave the planet. We're about to be raptured. Wow. Are you ready to see the King? You ready to see those eyes as a flame of fire, feet like undefined brass, voice of many waters? Wow, the resurrection and the life. He said, I am he that was dead. Behold, I'm alive forevermore. He said, and I have the keys of death and hell. The whole earth's going to see him at that second coming, and they're going to hit their knees and bow and say, he is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Wow, so soon we'll see him. Come back next week. We'll look at what all's happened with Iran, look what's happened with Syria, and we'll see if Iran went ahead and started another wave of attacks on Israel. Wonderful times to be on the earth. Very scary for the world, wonderful for the church. If you hear end time preaching and it scares you, it's not Bible. So come back next week and we'll see what else happened. We'll have a great time. Have a blessed, wonderful Wednesday. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.